olive oil comes down to two things, right? Fresh fruit, fresh oil. And the big challenge, the reason there's so much, I like to call it commodity oil, but why there's so much oil that's produced outside of that ideal harvest window is physiological. Olives are really hard to get off the tree in the fall, right? At the time when that fruit is the best for making oil, it's hard to get off the tree. And up until about 15 years ago, the technology didn't exist to get the fruit off the tree in the fall at any kind of meaningful scale. It was all hand harvest. And as you can imagine, it would take a lot of people to hand harvest enough olives to produce enough oil for everyone that wants, quote unquote, extra virgin olive oil. So the big game changer in our industry happened about 15 to 20 years ago. And it's a new method of planting we call super high density or vineyard style planting. And essentially what you do is you take olive trees and you plant them a lot like grapes on trellises in these long hedgerows. And what it's done is two things. Number one, we can now mechanize the harvest, right? So we can harvest at scale and rapidly. But most importantly, and this is the take-home message, we can do it in the fall when the olives are perfect for making high-quality oil. So that's the big game changer.
So are you saying that like before this technology that, it would be advantageous to let them almost like go past their state of ripeness so that they could fall off the trees and be collected easier? Is that kind of what it is?
Totally, yeah. So the olives, when they get overripe, they're about to drop off the tree. And the technology that existed up until about 15 years ago were trunk shakers like they use for nuts. And as you can imagine, if you let the olives go way past to where they're about to drop, you'll get way more olives off the tree with a trunk shaker. The other thing that happens is the olives continue to accumulate oil, so you'll get a little bit more oil out of it. But that's, in my mind, that's the commodity play. That's not the quality play. And I think what's so exciting right now is we're able to make the quality play at scale.
Got it. And like, who even do you guys like help to develop this technology, or are there just companies out there that are looking for these solutions?
Yeah, no, there's actually a nursery in Spain that developed the technology. Most of us New World producers that don't have like a massive infrastructure of the old way of planting, we're all adopting this new planting method. And even so Spain's the largest producer by far of they have. California, we have we always talk about all of our almonds, right? We're the largest almond producer. We've got 1.2 million acres of almonds. In the south of Spain alone, they've got over 4 million acres of olives.
Jesus.
Yeah. So, and in Spain, they're changing over to this new system too. The writing's on the wall. At the end of the day, it's about quality. People are willing to pay, especially in the U.S., people are willing to pay a little more for quality. The reality is it's not a lot more. And it makes food so much better that people are jumping on. So,
yeah, one of the other things that I saw you guys do that got me really excited and made me go out to my food distributor and buy 10-liter things of olive oil for my mother and my whole entire family was that you're using this bag in the box technology, and it seems like even if you get a really high quality olive oil and you keep it in a dark place and a cool place, when you open that, it's got to be oxidizing at that point because there's air inside. You guys have found a solution to that. I've had olive oil that sits in my cupboard for, months at a time. And I got to imagine that, I'm not getting, the benefits, from a nutritional standpoint and from a taste standpoint from that. How did that all come about?
100%. That's the second part of the equation, right? So you start with the fresh fruit, you make the fresh oil, then what, right? Then it takes a ton of energy to protect it. And the reality is the things that destroy olive oil are light, heat, and air. And so you have to put a ton of energy into keeping light, heat, and air out of it. So for example, what we do, we crush the olives, we extract the oil, it goes straight into a climate-controlled cellar under nitrogen, right? So to keep the oxygen out, in stainless steel. And then we package just in time, which means basically as we get orders, then we package in bag-in-box, or we call it flavor lock, because it also keeps light, heat, and air out. And then it goes into the real world for the shortest period of time. And honestly, at the end of the day, people ask me, what's your job as a master miller? And A lot of people, it's like a winemaker, right? A lot of people think the winemaker's job stops at making the wine, but that's not true, right? It's all about making sure that the customers at the end of the day get the freshest oil possible in my case. Because it doesn't matter how good it is when it leaves the mill. If it's not good when your mom gets it, right, then it doesn't, then we've lost, right? So at the end of the day, it's all about making sure that the customers get the freshest oil. And honestly, the only way to do that is at least up until now is through bag and box.
Yeah, agree. I mean, to me, it's like really exciting technology. You guys kind of got that from the wine industry almost too, right? It was
totally straight from the wine industry. They've done a lot of work for figuring out the best ways to keep things fresh, and so we just brought it over.
Yeah, so I know like a lot of people, I know everybody in this industry, they've heard like these kind of stories. I know there was a New York Times report a few years back, and I think the guy wrote a book named Extra Virginity. What's all that about? Like, for the people, like, what's it? Because I think people like read a thing or they hear a thing and then the story gets messed up. Like, what is that? It's kind of like what's going on with all that for all the people that don't know the real story? I think you know the real story.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, really. It's a combination of two things. We like to say around here that, olive oil is the ingredient that farm to table forgot. What's that mean? That means no one's paying attention, right? No one's paying attention. We don't have a great palate for it in general as a country because it just hasn't been part of our food culture, at least high quality oil, right? And it's also extremely valuable. So what ended up happening is you started seeing a lot of fraud, right? There are different kinds of fraud. There's straight adulteration where people would, swap out olive oil for less expensive oils and sell it as extra virgin olive oil. There is oil that maybe was extra virgin when it left, but by the time it gets here, it's not extra virgin anymore. And the reality is the chemists that are behind this kind of stuff are super sophisticated. And I'm on several standards committees trying to figure out how we can catch a lot of the fraud that's happening, but it's really difficult to do. So you just end up with, a lot of fraud and people making a lot of money on fraud.
Tell me more about this standards committee stuff and some of the problems that are trying to be fixed in that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I kind of alluded to it earlier. So in my opinion, and not everyone shares this opinion, but in my opinion, the extra virgin standard is like getting a D in school, right? It means you passed, but you didn't do anything well. And the reason I say that, there's two parts to the extra virgin standard. There's the chemistry part, and then there's the sensory part. And the sensory part is there are accredited panels around the world that taste oils. They do a blind sensory analysis on it. And if they detect any defects in the oil, right, from maybe rotten fruit or the oil has been sitting around and it's rancid or exposed to light or something like that, if they detect any defects, then it's no longer extra virgin.
Okay.
And then the chemistry is built around that, right? So the chemistry all targets no defects. So at the end of the day, what you're saying, all extra virgin really means is there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't mean there's anything right with it. And that's why I say it's like a D in school. Okay, you passed, great. But that's not how we make food better, right? That's not how we make pizza better, right? We do that by buying the best oil we can.
Sure, 100%. And I know there's, so, I mean, when it comes to that I feel like there's a lot of things out there that say extra virgin olive oil in this country that, do they pass that test before they get, fugazied up, or like how did those guys get through the standard?
Well, so I think, it's a great question. So there's fraud, yes, but I don't think that's the biggest problem. Mm-hmm. The biggest problem, honestly, is that testing is done at the time of production.
Okay.
Right? And we all, it takes your oil can be 9 months old or even more, in some cases up to 2 years old before you get it on the shelf. So even if it did meet this D standard at the time of production, by the time you get it on the shelf, there's no way it's even close to extra virgin. And I think that's our biggest problem. It's not fraud. It's just that it's so hard to get fresh oil to customers. Most people don't even try.
So is there like a big like private labeling industry in olive oil where people are just taking random fruit from random places and then, pressing that somewhere? Is that like something that exists a lot?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's, we often joke that there's one giant tank in Spain, right? And whatever kind of olive oil you want, it comes out of that tank, and that's the commodity part.
Right.
And there is private label. I mean, there's a bunch of supermarkets in the U.S. that have their own brands. They all come from the exact same place. Even a lot of the branded stuff, it's all the same commodity product.
So, what's the real message out there for from the pizza guys and the chefs and this and that? I just want to really be able to tell them kind of how you talk about it on your tour, you know what I'm saying? These problems that exist, and maybe what are the benefits of getting a good quality olive oil, from flavor to what I'm saying, everything else that comes along with it. There's nutritional benefits too, right?
There are. I mean, so fats are excellent carriers of flavors and aromas. That's what they do, and that's amazing. If you're talking about we can take a step back. What makes olive oil different? Olive oil is a celebration of flavor, right? All of the other oils that are out there go through a refining process. They're destined to be the exact opposite of what olive oil is. They're odorless, colorless fats at the end of the day. Olive oil is the exact opposite. Olive oil is a celebration of the fruit. It's a celebration of flavor. So when you put olive oil in food, it heightens, it elevates the flavor of that food. It's pretty remarkable. One of my favorite things to do is to take vanilla ice cream and put a really fresh Arbequina or Oji Blanca or even an Ascalano varietal olive oil on it. It has to be fresh and it has to be high quality, right? Because that's once you open the door to fresh olive oil, that's when we can start talking about varietals and regions and all of that. Put a little sea salt on it and it tastes amazing. It's like a fruity ice cream. And that's just 3 varieties out of hundreds that are available. And that's the doorway that I'm trying to open, that we're trying to open for our chefs and for our pizziolos is, once you start thinking of olive oil in those terms and you start pairing flavors in with the pizza you're making, that's the next level. That's the next step. Right now, what we're doing, and I can't tell you how often this happens to me, where I'll go try, I'll eat a pizza or I'll have an olive oil ice cream. Someone's, they're cutting edge enough to have an olive oil ice cream, and guess what it tastes like? Rancid olive oil.
Right.
Right. Or someone will make a beautiful white bean puree, and I'll taste it, and it tastes rancid, or like it's from fermented fruit. So at the end of the day, olive oil, especially when it's high quality, it'll make food better.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And a lot of these, I think there's a lot of misconception out there about these refined oils that are out there. I mean, they're kind of like a lot of refined oils are expeller press from seeds, right? Mostly. And
well, yeah, so expeller pressing is an interesting one. So, at the end of the day, like I said, refined oils, their destination, their goal in life is to become colorless, odorless fats with really high extraction. And the way you get the highest extraction is through solvent extraction. So they basically make pellets out of the stock, and they'll use a solvent to extract the oil. Sometimes there's so much oil, like in seeds, for example, that they have to remove some of the oil ahead of time. So they'll do that with an expeller. And then the expeller, expeller press oil, or chemically has some advantages over refined oil, but it's not. I never want to confuse that with something like olive oil that's totally virgin, right? Where it's crushed cold and it retains all of the natural antioxidants and nutrients and flavors from the fruit. It's a very different product.
Yeah, what are some of these antioxidants and flavonoids and the health benefits? I know we talked about previously about some amazing studies that are out there and ongoing. What's going on in the world of that?
So let me preface this by my disclaimer. So I'm not a nutritionist. not even a chemist really, but what I've learned a lot over the last 12 years in this industry, kind of practical knowledge, applying it to my job. And one of the things I realized early on, and it was actually a friend of mine who's a researcher at University of Maryland a doctor, and she is a big proponent of olive oil. And she always starts her conferences by saying, if you go on to PubMed, which is the biggest database of scientific medical literature, and you Google or you search through PubMed and classify journals by food, the one category that trumps all the others by far is olive oil. In other words, there is more written in medical literature about olive oil by far than any other food there is. And most of that literature up to this point has been focused, maybe up until about 10 years ago, has been focused on types of fat and things like that, kind of the quote unquote edible oil world, right? But starting about 10 years ago, there's been a tremendous, kind of rejuvenation in olive oil literature around polyphenols and antioxidants, and the role of these different compounds in health, in brain health, in cardiovascular health, as anti-inflammatories. So there's just this really fun resurgence that's happening around this small fraction of compounds in olive oil that are there because the oil isn't processed in any way. It's just juice.